Willow Creek. A small town nestled in the heart of Texas is the kind of place where time seems to stand still. The streets are lined with ancient oak trees, white-painted wooden houses with low fences, and the faint sound of country music drifting from local diners, all weaving a picture of tranquility. But sometimes that tranquility is just a facade, concealing secrets no one dares to speak aloud. My name is Lily Harper, 22 years old, fresh out of community college, and back home to help my mum. Susan run our family's small general store. I live with her and my stepfather, James Carter, a man who used to be the town's sheriff before retiring early, due to a leg injury he sustained during a criminal pursuit. James is a tall man with salt and pepper hair and deep blue eyes that remind me of the sky after a storm. He's always calm, a man of few words, but whenever he enters a room, the air seems to grow heavier with his presence. He has a habit of wearing plaid shirts, with the sleeves rolled up, and often sports an old cowboy hat. A true Texan through and through. Though we live under the same roof, we've never been close. James is polite to me, but there's always been an invisible wall between us. He spends most of his time in the garage, tinkering with his old Ford truck, or sitting on the porch with a can of Lone Star beer. His gaze lost in the distance, as if he's caught in thoughts no one can reach. My mum. Susan is a lively woman, always busy with community events. She's an active member of the women's group at First Baptist Church, constantly organising bake sales or fundraisers for the local school. She loves James, but I've always sensed a gap between them that no words can bridge. I once overheard her complaining to a friend over the phone. James is always so quiet, never shares anything with me. Sometimes I wonder if he's even happy, but then she'd laugh it off as if those words didn't matter. One swelteringly unbearable summer afternoon, the Texas sky blazed red like fire, and Mum was busy preparing for a bake sale at the church. I was home alone with James. A rare occurrence, since Mum is usually the one bridging the gap between us. I had just taken a shower. The cool water, a welcome relief from the oppressive heat of the day. Standing in front of my mirror, clad only in my underwear, I was about to slip into a light floral dress when I heard the faint creak of my bedroom door. "Lily, did you forget to lock your door?" James's voice came through deep and steady, like a stone dropping into a still pond. I spun around, my heart pounding in my chest. James stood there at the threshold, his deep blue eyes fixed on me. Time seemed to freeze. I didn't know what to do. I just stood there, my breath quickening as I felt his gaze sweep over me. Not hurriedly, but long enough for a jolt of electricity to run down my spine. I didn't cover myself, nor could I move. I just stared back at him, my chest rising and falling rapidly. James's gaze wasn't that of a stepfather. It held something deeper, more complex and dangerously alluring. "Sorry," he said, his voice tinged with hesitation, before turning away and closing the door. But in that voice I sensed something that didn't sound entirely apologetic. It carried a hint of regret, a trace of longing he didn't want to admit. I whispered, "It's okay." But my voice trembled, and deep down I knew everything had changed. The image of James's gaze haunted me for the rest of the day. I told myself it was just a mistake, an awkward moment that would quickly fade. But I was wrong. That feeling didn't disappear. It was like a small flame smouldering in my heart, waiting to ignite into something fierce. In the days that followed, I tried my best to avoid James. Whenever he was in the house, I found excuses to leave helping Mum at the store. Taking walks around town, where old pickup trucks lined the streets, and the scent of dry grass hung in the air. But his image kept resurfacing in my mind. Those deep blue eyes, the rare but captivating smile, and his low, warm voice. I scolded myself. He's my stepfather, my mother's husband. I shouldn't be thinking of him this way. But the more I tried to suppress it, the stronger that feeling grew, like a storm brewing inside me. I started noticing small details about James that I'd never paid attention to before. The way he held his beer can, his large but deft hands when he worked on the truck, or the way he furrowed his brow. When deep in thought, I wondered if he'd ever seen me as a woman, not just his wife's daughter. The thought made me ashamed, yet it sent my heart racing. I felt like I was losing my way, but I didn't know how to stop. One evening, as I was washing dishes in the kitchen, the dim yellow light casting shadows on the old ceramic plates, I overheard a conversation between James and Mum. They were in the living room. Mum's voice filled with frustration. "James, you're always like this. Always so quiet. Do you know how exhausting it is for me to handle everything on my own? I organise everything from the bake sales to the festival, but you never care." "James," replied, his voice low but cold. "Susan, you're always busy with your friends, with the community. Have you ever thought about me? I sit here day after day, and you don't even notice what I need." The argument ended with Mum storming out the front door, slamming shut. The sound echoing through our small house. I stood there in the shadows of the kitchen, peering through the crack in the door. James sank onto the couch, his hands cradling his head, his posture radiating loneliness. The faint light illuminated his face, highlighting the sharp lines and the sadness in his eyes. I'd never imagined a man as strong as James could feel so alone. He used to be the sheriff, a man the whole town respected. But now he was just a man abandoned by his wife in his own home. I wanted to walk over to comfort him, to tell him I understood that feeling, that I too had felt lonely in this family. But I didn't dare. I was afraid that if I got too close, I wouldn't be able to control my emotions. I turned back to the dishes, trying to focus on the task. But my hands trembled and silent tears fell. That night I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, wondering if I was overthinking everything. But deep down I knew I was being drawn into a forbidden emotion I couldn't escape. A few days later, the whole town buzzed with excitement for the annual Willow Creek Summer Festival, an event no one wanted to miss. The town square was adorned with triangular red, white and blue flags, the colours of the American flag. Booths, selling burgers, apple pies and craft beer, lined the area. The local band played country tunes, their music blending with the laughter of children and adults alike. My mum, Susan, was the main organiser, bustling around with the bake booth and games for the kids. She wore a red plaid shirt, her hair tied high, looking as radiant as the summer sun. James and I went too, though I wasn't particularly eager. I wore a light yellow floral dress, my hair loose, trying to blend into the crowd, but my eyes kept drifting to James. He leaned against an old oak tree, dressed in a white shirt, with the sleeves rolled up, holding a cold beer. Under the blazing sun, he looked undeniably attractive, like a character straight out of the cowboy movies I used to watch. His rare smile as he chatted with a neighbour made my heart race. Mum, as usual, got swept up with her friends. She laughed loudly, then pulled me over to James and said, "James, dance with Lily for a song. I need to check on my friends over there. Betty just made a fresh batch of apple pie. I can't miss it." Before I could protest, James smiled and extended his hand. "Come on, Lily. Let's not disappoint your mum," he said, his voice gentle but commanding. I couldn't refuse. though my heart was in turmoil. I placed my hand in his, feeling the warmth of his calloused palm. We stepped into the middle of the square where people were dancing to an upbeat country tune. Sweet Home Alabama blared through the speakers, and the crowd cheered. As James placed his hand on my waist, I felt his warmth seep through the thin fabric of my dress, the scent of his woody cologne mixed with the summer air making me dizzy. "You're a good dancer, Lily," he said, his voice warm, his eyes never leaving mine. I forced a smile. "I just don't want to embarrass you." But inside I was fighting a fierce battle. I knew I shouldn't feel this way. I shouldn't let my heart race for this man. When the song ended, the crowd clapped. But James didn't let go of my hand right away. He looked at me, his gaze deep as if searching for something. "You know how beautiful you look in that dress," he whispered, his voice low and husky. I blushed, looking down, unable to meet his eyes. "Thank you." I mumbled, my voice barely audible, but my heart was pounding. After the dance, Mum still hadn't returned. James and I sat on a wooden bench watching the crowd. A few kids ran by, holding oversized cotton candy, giggling. James spoke suddenly. "Your mum's always like this, always putting her friends first. Sometimes I wonder if I even matter to her." His voice carried a hint of sadness, and I felt his loneliness. "I understand," I replied softly. "But you're not alone, James." The words slipped out before I could think, and James's gaze turned intense, as if he was searching for something in me. Just then, Emily, my best friend, approached. Emily is a blonde, blue-eyed girl, always as radiant as the sun. She looked at me and James, her eyes flickering with suspicion. "Lily, I need to talk to you for a sec," she said, pulling me to a corner near the lemonade stand. Once we were alone, she whispered, "Lily, I don't know if I'm imagining things, but the way you and James look at each other, something's off. You need to be careful. This is Willow Creek. People notice every little thing." Emily's warning hit me like a bucket of cold water. I forced a laugh. "You're overthinking it. There's nothing going on." But deep down I knew she was right. I was walking a dangerous path and I didn't know how to stop. In the days following the festival, the town's atmosphere turned strange. I started hearing whispers whenever I went to the general store. "Did you hear? Clara said she saw Lily and James Carter acting inappropriately?" A woman murmured to her friend as I stocked bread on the shelves. I pretended not to hear, but my heart raced. Clara was our nosy neighbour who lived across the street. She was notorious for exaggerating everything, but this time I knew she wasn't entirely lying. Clara claimed she saw me and James hugging in our backyard in broad daylight while Mum was away. I was watering my plants when I saw them clear as day. James hugged Lily from behind, and she giggled like nothing was wrong. Clara recounted to the women in her church sewing group, her voice brimming with excitement. The rumour spread like wildfire, reaching Mum's ears. That evening, Mum came home with a tense expression. She didn't say anything, but her eyes as she looked at me and James were full of suspicion. I panicked and sought out James after Mum went to bed. "James," Clara said, "she saw us. She's spreading rumours everywhere." I whispered, my voice trembling. James frowned. What could she have seen? We didn't do anything wrong. But I knew he was worried too. Maybe she saw the day you helped me lift that water jug in the backyard, but she's blown it out of proportion. "We need to be more careful," I said, my voice laced with fear. "If Mum finds out, everything will fall apart." James placed his hand on my shoulder, his voice steady. "Lily, I'll handle this. Don't worry." But his touch, even as a gesture of comfort, made my heart race. I turned away, trying to suppress my emotions, but I knew we were standing on a dangerous edge. That night, I couldn't sleep, lying awake and staring at the ceiling, thinking about what might happen if the truth came out. I wasn't just worried for myself. I was worried for Mum. She'd spent her life building this family, and I was tearing it apart. The days that followed were suffocating. Mom started noticing every little thing James and I did. She'd ask pointed questions like, "Lily, what did you and James do today while I was out?" Or, "James, have you noticed Lily going out a lot lately?" I tried to answer normally, but my voice trembled with every word as if I were standing on thin ice. One evening, as I was setting the table for dinner, Mum suddenly asked Lily, "You and James have been acting strange lately. Are you hiding something from me?" I flinched, dropping a ceramic plate onto the floor, the shattering sound echoing in the quiet space. "Nothing's going on, Mum," I stammered, bending to pick up the pieces, my hands shaking. "You're overthinking it." But Mum wasn't easily convinced. She stared at me, her gaze sharp. "Lily, I'm not stupid. I can feel something's wrong. You're my daughter. Do you think I wouldn't notice?" That night I overheard Mum and James arguing in their bedroom. I stood outside the door, my heart pounding. "James, do you think I don't see it? The way you and Lily look at each other. Do you take me for a fool?" Mom's voice was filled with anger and hurt. James replied, his tone cold. "Susan, you're imagining things. I haven't done anything wrong." But I knew he was lying. He felt the tension between us, and he was struggling with his emotions just like I was. The argument ended with James storming out the front door, slamming shut, the sound reverberating through the house. Mum sank onto the couch, sobbing uncontrollably. I stood in the shadowed hallway, guilt washing over me like a tidal wave. I knew I was wrong, but I couldn't stop thinking about James. After Mum fell asleep, I snuck out, grabbing my bike and pedalling to Rusty Nail, a small bar on the outskirts of town where I guessed James would go. I needed to see him, to know what he was thinking and to face my own emotions. Rusty Nail, a bar on the edge of town, was a haven for those looking to escape. I walked in the dim lights and the heavy scent of beer enveloping me. A blues song played from an old speaker, mingling with the chatter of a few patrons. James sat at the far end of the bar, a half-empty glass of whiskey in front of him. He looked up as I approached, his eyes filled with surprise. "Lily, what are you doing here?" he asked, his voice hoarse from the alcohol. "I need to talk to you," I said, sitting beside him. We sat in silence for a while, the mournful blues music filling the space between us. Then James spoke. "Lily, I can't keep doing this. I know I shouldn't, but I can't stop thinking about you. Since that day when I saw you in your room, I can't get that image out of my head." His confession was like a spark, igniting every ounce of restraint I had left. "Me too, James," I whispered, tears welling up. "I know this is wrong, but I can't stop myself. I think about you all the time, and I don't know what to do." We looked at each other, our eyes brimming with longing and pain. James reached out his trembling fingers, brushing against my face. "Lily, if we do this, there's no going back," he said, his voice low but firm. I nodded, no hesitation in my heart. James took my hand, leading me out to his truck. We drove to an empty field near the river where the moonlight shimmered on the water's surface. In the cramped cab of the truck, we let our emotions take over. James's kiss was fierce, full of passion, as if he was trying to erase every ounce of guilt. With each touch, I responded, surrendering to the moment, forgetting everything, Mom, morality, and the world outside. The sound of the wind rustling through the dry grass mingled with our ragged breaths, creating a symphony of forbidden desire. When it was over, I lay in James's arms, my head resting on his chest, listening to the steady rhythm of his heartbeat. But the fleeting peace was quickly replaced by fear and guilt. "James, what have we done?" I whispered, my voice trembling. He was silent for a moment before replying. "I don't know, Lily, but I don't regret being honest with my feelings." His words were both comforting and painful. I knew we had crossed a line we couldn't uncross. The next morning I returned home, trying to act as if nothing had happened. But Mum was waiting for me in the living room, holding a letter. "Lily read this," she said, her voice icy. The letter was a handwritten note, the handwriting sloppy. "Susan, I think you should know the truth. I saw your daughter and your husband being intimate. A friend I recognized." Clara's handwriting immediately. Mom looked at me, her eyes filled with pain. "Lily, is this true?" she asked, her voice trembling. I couldn't lie. I just lowered my head, tears falling to the floor. James walked in at that moment, and Mum turned to him screaming, "James, what did you do to my daughter?" "You traitor." James stood silently, his eyes full of guilt. "Susan, I'm sorry," he said, his voice hoarse. "But I can't deny my feelings." The argument erupted fiercely. Mum sobbed, smashing a vase on the table. "I've spent my whole life building this family and you've destroyed it," she screamed, her voice breaking. James said nothing more, quietly, packing his things and leaving the house. The sound of his truck faded down the dirt road, leaving me and Mum in the wreckage of our family. Mum collapsed on the floor, crying uncontrollably. I stood there feeling like my entire world had crumbled. I had destroyed my family, all because of a moment of weakness. In the weeks that followed, Willow Creek was no longer a place I could stay. Mum stopped speaking to me, and the judgmental stares of the neighbours were unbearable. Every time I stepped outside, I heard whispers. "That's Lily, the girl who ruined her family. Or poor Susan. She didn't deserve this." I felt like a pariah with nowhere to belong. I decided to leave, moving to Austin to start over. I found a job at a small coffee shop, living in a cramped rented apartment, trying to rebuild my life. But I couldn't forget James. Every night I dreamed of him, his deep blue eyes and rare smile haunting me. I wondered where he was, if he thought of me as much as I thought of him. 3 months later, while I was working, I heard a familiar voice. "Lily." I looked up and there was James standing at the counter dressed in simple work clothes. He looked at me, his eyes filled with emotion. "I've been looking for you everywhere," he said, his voice low. "I know we were wrong, but I can't live without you." I stared at him, my heart racing. I didn't know if I could forgive myself or if we could ever have a future. But in that moment, I realized some emotions can't be erased by time. "James," I whispered, "what do we do now?" He smiled a sad but hopeful smile, and I knew the answer didn't lie in today but in the days ahead.